Hey, Mrs. Spatola here. Today we're going to look at Unit 2 Study Guide, Operations with Decimals. We're going to be using the study guide, and today we will be completing the even-numbered problems, and I will model some of them for you. You will pause and try some on your own, and then you'll be left to do the odd problems independently. Let's get started. First of all, we have our first topic, which is estimating products. So the steps for estimating products, as a review, round each number to the nearest whole number and then multiply. But before we start talking about products, what is a product? You definitely need to know this vocabulary. A product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So it's an answer to multiplication problem. What are the two numbers that we multiply together called? Do you know? Well, let's look at this example right here. We have 93 times 387. Each of these numbers that we multiply together are called factors. So you definitely want to make sure you know what those are. If it's easier, what I would even do is start to make some index cards with some of these vocabulary terms. There is a lot to remember in math, and if you know this, you will know that it's like learning a language. Sometimes we learn different languages and we have to use index cards, or even just as a study tool. So index cards are a huge help. So we're going to look at problem number 2. We're going to round each number to the nearest whole number and multiply. And remember, we estimate early to make it easier. One of the biggest problems that I see is that boys and girls are not rounding the numbers first. Anytime you estimate or round, you must round each number first. Round each number first. Some of you are multiplying or dividing, and then you're rounding your answer. That's not how we estimate or round. We estimate early. Remember, the early means do it first. Let's take a look at the problem here. 25 and 62 hundredths times 4 and 789 thousandths. So the first thing we want to do is round to the nearest whole number, which is the ones place. So we go here, 5 or more, add 1 more. This number 6 is higher than 5, so this number now becomes 26 times, and then 4 is the number that we're rounding to the nearest one. We go next door. 7 is higher than 5, so we add 1 here, so 26 times 5. And if you do the multiplication, it comes out to 130. Definitely check this with your calculator. The next topic is estimating quotients or using compatible numbers. So basically, this here is the section where you would be dividing. The first step is to find compatible numbers, and we talked about compatible numbers in class. Compatible numbers are numbers that would divide equally with no remainder. And with estimating quotients, when you're trying to get something that's compatible, there is more flexibility. It does not follow the same rules as estimating products. So for number 1, step 1, it says find compatible numbers, numbers that would divide equally, and step 2, actually divide. If you take a look at the example here, 945 divided by 28. 945 could round to 900, so if we rounded 945 to 900, we would round 28 to 30 so that it goes in evenly. Let's take a look at problem number 4. For problem number 4, there are a few ways we could go. 84 and 37 hundredths, and then we have 4 and 67 hundredths. Well, remember, we want these two numbers to be compatible, so when we look at these two numbers, we want to look at numbers that would go into each other evenly. So in other words, 84 and 37 hundredths would be divided by 4 and 67 hundredths, but if I'm estimating, I look at these numbers and what's closest. Well, I like to look at the smaller number first, and I see 467 rounds to about 5, and then I notice 84 and 37 hundredths, I could round that to about 85. And then you could go ahead and do the division, and you would get an answer of 17, and you could put that in your calculator just to check. The next topic we have is now multiplying decimals. So when we multiply decimals, we multiply, rewrite vertically and ignore the decimals. We write them up and down. We count all the places to the right of the decimals, and then starting at the right in the product, we count back to the left the number of places in step 2, and finally we place the decimal. Now, one thing to remember is you need to know your right from your left if you're multiplying decimals. So if you notice in the example that we're giving here, it has the first problem written out, 2 95/100 times 3 2/10. And what they do is the first thing they do is they will rewrite the problem this way, going vertically up and down. We have 2 decimals here, 1, 2. Notice they have 2 decimals here and a decimal here. So we have 3 places total in the decimals. There are no decimals in the work. When you are doing the work for decimals, there are no decimals in the work. You only place them in the end. Now you multiply as usual, and then you bring your 3 decimals. Now watch, you start all the way at the right, just like the directions say, and then you move over. 1, 2, 3, and then you place your decimal. Let's take a look at question number 6. Let's take a look at question number 6 and do this one. So the first thing you want to do is set it up 8 2/10 times 7 6/10. So first thing you do is you set it up. And you can always refer back to the directions over here. Very important. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop. There are 1, 2 places. And now I'm going to multiply as usual. Now it tells me that there are 2 places in my product. So I start here and I scoop 1, 2. So my final answer is 62 32/100. And that's my answer. Let's continue down for division steps. With division steps, one of the things you may have heard, does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers raw? What does that represent? It represents the steps. Step 1, divide. Step 2, multiply. Step 3, subtract. Step 4, compare. Step 5, bring down. And 6, repeat. Now, if there is a remainder, we place the decimal and annex the 0 until there is no remainder. We spent time on this in class, so for those of you that were in class, you can look back at your notes or just go back and refer to the video in this unit on division steps. When you are dividing, the first number is called your dividend. The second number is called your divisor. And then the last number, your answer, is called the quotient. One thing to remember when you're using a calculator is that the first number, the dividend, goes first in the calculator. We are going to change this first number, though, to 259 because otherwise we'll be here all day. So we're going to change this problem, 259 divided by 7. So this number here, that first number, that dividend, goes inside the division house or the division box first, and there's your divisor. Take a second, do the division. And your final answer is 37. On this page here, here's another one. Does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers raw? There are your steps for dividing decimals. All good. Okay, let's take another look at division symbols, and let's talk about this. One thing that Mrs. Gelderman and I have noticed in class is that sometimes when boys and girls check their work with the calculator, they're putting the numbers in the wrong order in the calculator, and then your answers are just a mess. So let's take a look. With division symbols, we use the division symbol here. We also can use another method is using the division house or the division box. And notice the names of the terms. Your divisor goes on the outside. Your dividend goes on the inside. And the answer, which is up here, is called the quotient. Good. That's your quotient. And then remember, the last way and one of the most popular ways we'll be looking at decimal fractions this year is going to be when we use the fraction bar. Let's take a look at problem number 10. For number 10, notice we had to annex a couple of zeros. We had to place the decimal, and remember the decimal goes straight above. It goes right into the quotient, and it's there and ready for you. I would recommend going over 3 places, and then after that, I would just stop there. Most of these numbers in the study guide and in your workbook are pretty kid-friendly. Will you ever come across problems where it's going to go on quite a bit more? Absolutely, but you would listen to the directions. I'm telling you, go as far as 3 places and then stop. But for us, most of the time, if you are going more than 3 places, then you probably made a mistake. This section here, terminating decimals, is just a review. When dividing, there is no remainder. So for example, if you have a fraction where you're changing 1/2 into a decimal, your answer would be 5/10. The top number becomes your dividend and the bottom number becomes your divisor. And that's how you get the 5/10. Let's just slide it over and let's just do a little practice, a little reminder. So it's 1/6. We want to change 1/6 into a decimal. We do that with division. So this is actually written as 1 divided by 6, or we put 1 inside the division house. We know we have to annex some zeros, so probably 1 or 2. Start with 2 and continue from there. Try that one on your own. Notice something is happening with problem number 12. The number 6 seems to be repeating itself. So therefore, it keeps going on and on. If we would continue to bring this down, this would be 4. That is something that we would call a repeating decimal. A repeating decimal is when dividing, the remainder is the same number, or the remainder is a pattern. So number 12 was a repeating decimal. Let's keep going here. Dividing decimals by whole numbers. Set up your division house, bring up the decimal, divide. If there are more numbers needed, always annex or add the 0 after the decimal or last digit, after the decimal in the dividend, and you continue to annex zeros until there is no remainder. Try number 14 on your own, and then pause the video and check. And there's your final answer. If you got this question wrong, please check and see where you made your mistake. Remember, the first number is called your dividend. The dividend always goes in the house. Try number 14 on your own. And there's your answer to number 14. Here we have a review of dividing decimals by decimals. So the first thing you want to do is check to see if there is a decimal in the divisor. If the answer is yes, you need to stop right there and realize that you have to move the decimal to make the number in the divisor a whole number. Then you move the decimal in the divisor until it becomes a whole number and follow the remaining steps. One of the other things that you have to remember is that you have to rewrite the problem. So let's take a look together at problem number 16. Problem number 16 is 72 8/10 divided by 1 4/10. So the first thing we're going to do is set this up with the division house. So the first thing I do is say, set up my division house. Now, where does this first number go? Correct. That is called your dividend. It goes inside the division house. Then the next thing is we address the divisor. The divisor is the worker that's trying to break into the dividend, so we put that on the outside. Now, I notice here there is a decimal here. So we can't have that. In order to divide with decimals, we learned that the rule is that we can't have a decimal in the divisor. So what we have to do is move the decimal one place over here to make it a whole number. The next thing we do is we would move the number, the decimal place in the dividend, also one place here. Because remember, what's the rule? Whatever we do to the outside, we have to do to the inside. Good. So now the last thing I need to do is rewrite the problem, and then I can go ahead and solve. So it's 14 divided into 728. Notice I actually, in this problem now, I have no decimals left. Hopefully I don't have to annex any zeros. Try this one on your own. Pause the video. And there you have your answer of 52. When multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, and 1,000, basically all it is a little number trick. When you multiply, you move the decimal one place to the right for each zero. So that means that you are going to be moving the decimal to the right for the number of zeros you have in the problem. So if we take a look at problem number, well, actually, let's skip down. Let's do problem number 20. We'll do problem number 20. So all I have to do here for problem number 20 is I see that there are two numbers. It's 1 and 51/100ths times 100. I want my number to get bigger, so 2 zeros. I have to move my decimal to the right. 1, 2. My final answer is 151. When dividing, I notice that the rule reads this way. You move the decimal one place to the left for each zero. So basically what you're doing is you're moving it the opposite way. Let's take a look at problem number 18. So we have 608 and 1/10 divided by 100. Well, if I know I'm dividing, I know the number's going to get smaller. So if I have 2 zeros here, I'm simply going to move my decimal 1, 2 places to the left. So my final answer is 6 and 81/1000ths. Now, all you have to do is check it with your calculator. But boys and girls, just know that when you multiply by 100 or 10 or 1,000, you move the decimal, the number of zeros, to the right. That is in your factor. When you divide by 10, 100, and 1,000, you move your decimal to the left, the number of zeros in the divisor. I am going to ask you to cross out this chart here for the time being because this is actually for something else. It gets a little confusing, so I'm just going to ask you to cross this out at this time. For problem number 22, we have a word problem. Jillian estimates that she can make 26 puzzles in a week. She sells each puzzle for $13.45. Estimate how much Julie would make in 4 weeks. Well, first of all, I see a mistake. This should be Jillian, not Julie. So let's forget about Julie for now and we'll just make it Jillian. Alrighty, so there we go. We have Jillian. We want to know about Jillian. So the question is, because when we are solving word problems, we always start with the question. It's telling us estimate how much Jillian will make in 4 weeks. So I know two things are going to happen. I'm going to be rounding numbers. So the first number that I see is 26 puzzles. So I'm going to write this down. And you can do this along with me. Or pause the video at any time. 26 puzzles, and she sells each one for $13.45. $13.45. So what I want to do is round to figure out how much she will make in about 26 weeks. So I want to round each number. So I know I'm going to multiply 13.45 times 26. So let's take a look here. A couple of ways we could do it. If I round to the nearest whole number, I see that 13.45 would round to 13. I see that 26 is already a whole number, so I could leave it like that, and I could get my answer. There are a couple of other ways that I could do it. Remember, we want to estimate early so we can make it easy, and really, both numbers should be rounded. So what I'm going to do, just to make my life easier, I'm going to round this $13.45 to $13, and I'm going to round this 26 puzzles to about 30. I'm going to round to the greatest place here. So if I multiply 30 times 13, I get a product of 390. Now, when I do the actual multiplication, if I actually multiply 26 times 13.45, I notice that my actual answer is $349.70. Is it close? Pretty much. Sometimes estimating can be a little confusing, boys and girls, but always try your best, follow the rules, and at least if you show your work, you're going to get credit. Great job. Try the odd number problems now on your own, and the answers will be posted. Have a great day.